Right then, pull up a chair, grab a pint or a cup of tea if you're feeling proper. And let me tell you about a bloke who was the final nail in the coffin of the Wild West. We're talking about a man who was part army scout, part detective, and if you believe the stories, part boogeyman for every cattle rustler in Wyoming. This is the tangled, messy and bloody tale of Tom Horn. Now, Tom Horn wasn't your typical dusty cowboy. Born in Missouri in 1860, he had a rough start, with a father who was apparently handier with a belt than a kind word. So, at 16, young Tom did what any sensible lad would do when faced with a miserable home life. He legged it. He headed west, drawn by the promise of adventure, and more importantly, a distinct lack of his dad. This wasn't just some sulky teenager running away from home, mind you. Horn was built different. He was tough, resourceful, and had a knack for picking things up. He lands in the Southwest and gets a job as a civilian scout for the US Army. And he's not just good at it, he's brilliant. He learns to speak Spanish and even gets the hang of the Apache language. He's out there, tracking, fighting, and earning the respect of some of the hardest men in the country. He even played a part in the surrender of the legendary Apache leader Geronimo. This ain't no small feat. This is a man who could find a shadow in the dark. After his stint with the army, he drifts a bit. He tries his hand at mining, ranching, and even wins a steer roping championship. But the quiet life, it seems, wasn't for him. He was a man of action, a man who thrived on the edge. This is where the Pinkerton Detective Agency comes knocking. They see his reputation, his tracking skills, and his general air of "don't mess with me," and they sign him up. As a Pinkerton, he was a force of nature, chasing down outlaws, train robbers, the lot. He was relentless, a proper bloodhound. But here's where we start to see the darker side of Tom Horn. He was effective, no doubt, but his methods were, let's call them, unconventional. He had a philosophy that was about as subtle as a brick to the face. Killing men is my specialty. He wasn't about the paperwork or the due process. He was about results, and if that meant leaving a few bodies in his wake, so be it. This brings us to the core of our story, Wyoming. The late 1800s in Wyoming was a powder keg. Big cattle barons with their vast herds and even vaster fortunes were getting mighty upset about a little thing called rustling. People were helping themselves to their cattle, and the local law enforcement was either unable or unwilling to do much about it. So, these cattle barons, sitting in their fancy Cheyenne clubs, decide they need a solution, a permanent solution. They need a man who isn't afraid to get his hands dirty. They need Tom Horn. Horn is hired as a stock detective, which is a polite way of saying hired gun. His job was simple: make the rustling stop, and he did. He had a very particular method. He'd ride into an area, identify a suspected rustler, and then, from a long distance with a high-powered rifle, he'd solve the problem. One shot, one dead rustler. No witnesses, no trial, just a message. A very effective, very brutal message. For this, he was allegedly paid a handsome sum per head. Now, from a strategic standpoint, was this smart for the cattle barons? In the short term, maybe. It certainly put the fear of God into the rustlers. But from an ethical perspective, well, that's where it gets murky. Was there moral clarity here? Horn and his employers would probably say yes. They were protecting their property. But when your solution is assassination, you're not exactly walking the high road, are you? It's a classic case of the ends justifying the means, a dangerous game to play. And this is where it all goes pear-shaped for Tom Horn. In 1901, a 14-year-old boy named Willie Nickel is found shot dead near his family's ranch. The killing has all the hallmarks of a Tom Horn special, a long-range rifle shot from ambush. The boy's father, Kels Nickel, was a sheep rancher who had been in a long-running, bitter feud with the local cattlemen. It seemed pretty clear that the bullet was meant for the father, but it found the son instead. The community is in an uproar. Killing rustlers was one thing, but a child? That was a line you didn't cross. The law, in the form of Deputy US Marshal Joe LaForce, starts sniffing around, and LaForce has his sights set on one man, Tom Horn. Now, LaForce is a crafty one. He knows Horn has a bit of an ego and a fondness for the bottle, so he sets a trap. He gets Horn talking, pretending he's hiring him for a new job, and over a few drinks, he gets Horn to talk about the nickel killing. With a stenographer hidden in the next room, Horn, in what he later claimed was a drunken boast, supposedly confesses. He brags about his shooting prowess, how he could hit a target from a great distance. It's the confession that will seal his fate. The trial is a sensation. The cattle barons, who had been more than happy to use Horn's services, now want nothing to do with him. He's a liability. The prosecution has its confession, and despite the defence's arguments that it was coerced and that Horn was drunk, the jury finds him guilty. Tom Horn, the man who brought Geronimo to heel, the feared detective, is sentenced to hang. By the way, get this. Tom Horn was a master at braiding horsehair. While in jail awaiting his execution, he spent his time creating intricate ropes and other items. It's a strange image, isn't it? This man, known for his deadly efficiency with a rifle, sitting quietly, his hands creating something of delicate beauty. It's a stark contrast that makes the man all the more enigmatic. So, was he guilty? To this day, people argue about it. The evidence was circumstantial, the confession was questionable, and some even claim another man confessed to the crime years later. But at the time, public opinion was firmly against him. He was the symbol of the cattle baron's brutal reign, and the people wanted a reckoning. On November 20th, 1903, the day before his 43rd birthday, Tom Horn walked to the gallows. He was calm, composed, a man who had faced death many times before. His execution was carried out using a newfangled contraption, a water-powered gallows that was supposed to be more humane. The man who had lived by the gun died by a machine. What can we learn from the life of Tom Horn? Horn was a man of immense purpose. He valued strength and effectiveness above all else, but in doing so, he became a tool for others' greed. He was a man of action, but did his actions align with any sort of higher belief system beyond his own capabilities? His story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of vigilantism, about what happens when men decide they are above the law. He was a relic of a bygone era, a man whose skills were perfectly suited for the frontier, but hopelessly out of place in a world that was becoming more civilized. Tom Horn was the last gunslinger, a ghost of the Wild West, whose final fatal shot echoed the end of an era. Stay curious, stay sharp, and stay just sober enough to remember it all. This was just a swig of history, and if it wasn't in your textbook, it bloody well should have been. And before you go, do a brother fav and like, share and subscribe.